Welcome to the CEO Breakfast and Strategy Series, co-hosted by the Schneider School of Business and Economics at St. Norbert College. I'm Brian Brees, the president of the college. It's really my great joy to welcome you here today. Now in its 21st season, the CEO Series provides area executives with an opportunity to hear from some of our top CEOs. And today with Bob Pyle is no different. This resource is being brought to you through the generosity of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, WPS Health Solutions. Title sponsors are Meyer Construction, Johnson Bank and Johnson Insurance, and Insight Publication. And today's sponsor for this session is Fox Communities Credit Union. This series would not be possible without these sponsors. Could you please give them a round of applause? At your tables are folders, and we invite you to take that information with you and review it. It's information provided to us from our sponsors. The last thing between us and breakfast is a prayer, so I invite a blessing upon those gathered here in our time together. Loving God, let us give thanks for all that we have, including the gifts of peace and justice. During this time of budding spring, we ask for a blessing upon those who suffer, especially the family and friends and survivors of those who tragically lost their life in the horrible terrorism in Sri Lanka. May God's grace find them and remain with them in the days and months to come. And may the gifts of peace, joy, and hope one day soon be theirs. And for those gathered here today, for the food we're about to enjoy, and for all those prayers we hold in the silence of our hearts, we ask your humble blessing. For these and many other things, amen. Bon appetit. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Bob Pyle. Bob is the president and CEO of Pioneer Metal Finishing. A native of Green Bay area, Bob is a graduate of Pulaski High School and alum of UWGB, where he graduated with a degree in business. He married his high school sweetheart, Jean, and they have 2 daughters. He joined Pioneer Metal Finishing in 1998, shortly after the company had gone through a management buyout from Pioneer's parent company, Safeguard Scientific. In 2003, he was named president, and in 2007 led the company through a recapitalization that positioned Pioneer for rapid growth. During Bob's tenure, the company has tripled in size. This astonishing growth was accomplished through the balanced approach of organic growth and acquisitions. Today, Pioneer is recognized as the industry leader in North America. This morning, Bob will share one of the 6 acquisition experiences that Pioneer has completed. Please welcome Bob Pyle.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
So when I was approached to talk this morning, and we thought we could always talk about all the stuff that goes well, right? And I've heard a lot of great stories, and it's inspiring. And somebody talked me into talking about something that didn't go so well. So after I looked at the description of today's talk, I thought, well, maybe it's a little negative, but I guess a good train wreck makes good news sometimes. So the good thing about this is the outcome at the end of the day was very good. But what we're going to do is I'm going to share a little bit kind of that journey and what we went through, kind of lay it out a little bit, what it looks like, and then I'll share some of our learnings. And at the end, we'll have a little time. Maybe there'll be a few questions, and some folks here might have some things they want to share or have more questions. So a little bit about Pioneer. Because most people don't understand what we do. So because metal's on our name, the first thought is we make something. We make something out of metal, and I'm here to tell you we make nothing out of metal, but we live in metal. So basically we take other people's products and we add value to them, and I'll explain in a second what that looks like, but we're a service company is basically what we are. It really starts here, our culture. And what I want to point out here, because at the end of the day, this is the difference maker. And we have 24 fundamentals, that's what we call them. We used to be in a mission, vision, and value system. We've moved away from values. Values are nice, they say wonderful things, and very few of your people can really describe with any materiality what they mean, okay? So what we've done here is done that. These are all very simple. They probably resonate with you, very similar to your company. but they're very simple. And everybody through our organization can articulate and understand clearly what we mean by these things. Where when we had 5 values, if I had 5 people in the room and said, explain what this means to you, we'd get 5 different answers. So just a little bit about Pioneer. Already talked about our market position. We're in a big market. It's $3.5 billion, and it's very fragmented. Okay, that's what I would leave you with there. We're very diversified, run a lot of parts. We've done 6 acquisitions since '07. We have 1,300 employees. That's probably the one thing that gets people's attention. And we have 8 locations in North America. And I'll show you kind of where they're at in a second. I'm not going to get into our finishes because that's probably not a useful part of time, but I'll explain a little bit what they do because that'll resonate with you. And where we're at here, our end markets, automotive is a big end market for us, obviously, but we play across industrial. Obviously, being here in Green Bay, paper capital of the world, if you will. A lot of manufacturing in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and that's core to who we are. Aerospace, defense, recreation, healthcare, marine, and then there's the catch-all, all other. So this is kind of where we're located today. That footprint accounts in our industry for about 70% of all the services for metal type products in the U.S. And the Midwest accounts for 60% of it, and then it kind of spreads out from there. I'll talk, just as a footnote here, the acquisition that I'm going to talk about has, this plant here came with the acquisition as well as a few extras in Michigan. Just a snapshot on OEMs. These are people that you would recognize that are customers. And I would tell you if I put another list, it's a who's who here in town, but you don't recognize their names because they make parts that go into everything that we use. And I can assure you that we have product in your everyday life. If you drive a car, we have our products in your car. It's sunroofs, brake systems, fuel systems, drivetrain components. Would all be part of that. You got an airplane. We have a lot of the components in airplanes. So without going into the finishes that we do, basically we take product and make it corrosion resistant, right? Wear resistant. We do adhesive application, which applies to the acquisition I'm talking about today for rubber to metal bonding for cars. Cars have become quieter over time, and this is the reason why. And one of the reasons why we like the acquisition, because there's 2 sides to it. Conductivity, lubricity, and cosmetics. So those are, everything we do kind of wraps around these characteristics. So let's talk about the opportunity. It was a $36 million in sales. Their EBITDA was $7.6 million. EBITDA is what we kind of use to measure things for value. And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term or not. Automotive business, it was a growth-oriented business. As we were looking at it, it was growing at 12 to 20% per year. Interestingly enough, we did this acquisition in 2012, and the next 5 years kind of rolled out as we thought with the automotive industry. The automotive industry continued to grow during that time, and if you're familiar with it today, as of probably the last 12 months, there hasn't been growth in that marketplace. But it focuses around adhesive application for rubber to metal bonding. It allowed us to increase our wallet share in that market space. So we're a major player in automotive, but this was a different service, and from a market share standpoint, we thought it made sense for us. Mexico. So there's been a lot said about Mexico, good and bad. We believe that Mexico was a strong market at the time. We wanted to be in that market, and we still see that today. Accrete to the shareholder. So anytime you're doing an acquisition, you're looking at market position, market share, but we're no different than most others. We have shareholders, and this transaction was going to be accretive for the shareholders. So in our process, we go into due diligence. And so what I have up here is just kind of what did we see, okay? And we used a lot of outside folks to provide this. But our customers said, hey, we need to improve responsiveness and sales support. They're not as strong there. We saw that the systems were weak. They didn't have any KPI tracking in the plants, no boards up to track production, communicate to employees how well they were servicing customers. And I think it makes sense, there wasn't a lot of documentation on the floor on how to do their jobs, standard work. And typical with most acquisitions in our space, that's pretty typical. No preventive maintenance program, records, those types of things. Management was young and inexperienced. The ownership, Dad was 72, kind of out of the business, but he was the entrepreneurial mind that started things. Son was 43, and he was kind of running the day-to-day business. And he was going to stay on and work with us was the game plan, and Dad was going to go off into the sunset, right? They had accumulated a bunch of facilities, so not uncommon, entrepreneurial, you pick up things. They needed some services, so they bought some smaller businesses. And they didn't have the ability to invest the money to consolidate some of them together. So, literally, you'd have people chasing around different operations all within 4 or 5 miles of each other, moving product around. It was real inefficient. So that's a quick snapshot. So a little background, integration. So we had an integration team when we do our acquisitions. We had a team of 8 people. They spent full time once we closed the deal, working on culture, systems, leadership, sales support, our technology enhancements, financial. We do everything at corporate, so we were moving financial from the local to our corporate office, and then transitioning the HR to a corporate function as well. All right, so we'll get into the meat of it. So we did all that work. We identified, those risks, and we obviously decided to move forward. And I would say the success that we had in the first 5 acquisitions probably did not serve us well in this one. Steve's over there smiling at me, right? Yeah, that's true. Why is that? Well, the first 5 were like gold. Everything we did was perfect. It was a home run. So I think probably at some point you think you can fix everything. And I think we kind of got to that point where we thought, yeah, we can fix that. Yeah, we can fix that. We've done that. We can fix this. And that led us to this. So let me talk about trouble on the horizon. So this is going to be a little bit like a movie. I'm going to have to take you forward, and I'm going to take you back, okay? So just hang in there with me a little bit, and I'm going to try to tie it all together in a time frame, because as these things all happen, I think what's relevant here is kind of the flow of how things happen, but I'm going to talk about kind of what happened first. So management becomes a little obstructive, okay? So that's the local management team, not as cooperative. The integration team identifies inconsistencies and misrepresentations. I use those nice words. I'll use a different word later. I'm going to drop an F-bomb up here. You'll see that coming. So that's the nice way, but all of a sudden there's some environmental issues. We did environmental due diligence, okay? There was some HR issues. They had a great track record with workers' comp. Well, there was a reason why they had a great track record. And we found out after the first incident when somebody said, hey, where do I get my check, right? I was like, what check? Well, we used to get paid. Okay, so you got a problem, right? So when we bought the business, there was a growth pattern to it. They had been awarded a number of projects. So if you're familiar with automotive business, they're usually a year or 2 years out ahead on their programs. And so you have things coming, and there's planning that goes with it. So as we did the acquisition, we were quickly moving into the next 3 to 4 months for ramping up. Well, some things were missing during the ramp up. And tooling lead times are out 2 months, let's say. And you're supposed to be starting now. Well, you got a problem, right? the equipment, as we start to push it, starts to fail at an unbelievable rate. Management becomes more defensive, and the integration team entrenches itself in the operation. So what we kind of said, okay, we don't feel really good about this, so instead of, we're going to move from an integration team which brings things together and we work across to begin to take a little more control, because we were concerned about our ability to service our customers. Well, that kind of backfires on us. Because when we do that, then the acquisition team starts to do this, questions integrity. They no longer even want to work with some of the people on the floor because there's mistrust. It's not, I hear things like, Bob, this isn't who we are. This is not how we do things. These people are lying to us. So then that moves into, now we got trouble with customers. Now the programs are starting up. Behind the scenes, we're getting poisoned because people are telling the customers, Pioneer's screwing everything up. It's their fault. That's why some of this stuff's not rolling out, right? So as you fast forward it, we lose a $4 million program that was ramping up 6 months later when we were ready for it, right? That really hurt us. To top that off, we had another ramp up that we ended up firing the customer because the program wasn't priced right. The customer itself was completely out of control. And we said to them, hey, you know what? We think you should go somewhere else, right? It was a $2 million piece of business. So that in itself hurts. But then if you do anything with automotive, you're familiar with their terms and conditions. And so in automotive, they kind of have it all go one way. So literally, they sued us. Interestingly enough, what we got sued for, and we lost, by the way. Well, we settled out of court, but we kind of lost. And it goes like this. You have to pay for the outsourcing. And if they have to pay more money to go buy it from somebody else, you pay the difference. How you like that for? I'm kind of like, how does that work, right? So pretty dark days, right? So let me kind of give you a time frame how this lines up. We close the deal. 3 months in, sales are off the top line by 10%. The EBITDA number off the bottom line is 50% off a plan. So our antenna's up. We're kind of working the tea leaves here, trying to figure out kind of what's going on. 4 to 6 months in, ramping up of the new programs is the start, and we see steady decline in profitability. Increased equipment failure, downtime, and our OTD is between 70 and 80%. And that business, that's complete failure. Anything worse than 99% on time is complete failure. So you can imagine it's kind of like hair on fire, if I had any, at that point in time. So we brought people in for maintenance to try to keep the equipment up. We exited the son because he wasn't going to be any help to what was happening. And I hired a new GM. 7 to 10 months in after having the GM, and we had to clean house with all the management. That's painful. By the end of the year, we stopped the decline on the bottom line, but we're still feeling the effects of customer losses. So when it was all said and done, we saw a 74% decline in our EBITDA, so that $7.6 million decline. We watched our shareholder value decline $30 million during that time. By all measurements, that's not good. I'm looking around the room here, and I got some business partners in here that I won't point out, but they lived it with us. Probably wondering why I'm still here. Some days I do too, by the way. So it's a testament to having great business people working with you. So 12 to 18 months in, we consolidated those plants. There were 5 over there, and that was a lot of work, but it took a lot of the noise out of the equation. 9 to 24 months in, we began to have consistent improvement in our profitability, but we were still well below our expectations of from purchasing the business. Approximately 30 months out before we got back to where we wanted to be. So almost 3 years, 2.5 years. That was painful, to say the least. So changing the paradigm here. So living through this, there's a lot of sleepless nights. I know I didn't sleep a lot, and I know Steve wasn't sleeping either. We both come and look at each other. You sleep last night? No. And you think you're doing everything right. And the thing for me that was a changer for me here was we had different groups of people and we weren't working together. And it was like, we're the good guys, we're the bad guys. And I got together with the integration team and I just said, hey folks, I get this hasn't gone the way we wanted it to. It's not what we thought when we bought it, but it's our company. It's not their company, it's our company. We own it. We got to start acting like we own it, and it's part of it. And that was kind of what we did different here. So, because we were defensive and, people wanted to cover their butts and we're always pointing out all the negative stuff, we needed to change that and really start talking about who we are and what we're going to be. So, to walk into a facility, they had absolutely no safety culture. I point out here on the bottom. And if you tell them that, they didn't know what that meant. It was offensive to them. They thought what they did was perfectly fine. But when we talked about what it meant and how we would act and why it's important, how everybody was going to go home from work the way they came to work, that resonated. And when they got more of it, they wanted more of it. And then they came along the right direction. But up until then, we were really good at pointing out all the stuff that was bad, wrong. We got to change this isn't right, all that stuff. And it was offensive to some of the people there. And, if I was them, I guess I wouldn't want to cooperate as well, right? So it was pretty clear to us that the owners were fraudulent. And like I said, we became too focused on the negatives. And that's where that was the epiphany for me. If we didn't change something, this was probably not going to work, right? So we completely brought in outside management. So at this point, this was acquisition number 6. We had nothing left in the well. We tried to grow our management team. We had great depth. But after 5 acquisitions and moving people around the country and putting leaders in different roles, we kind of were empty on this one. So there was a little more risk with it associated with that. But we brought in from the outside, which makes it more difficult because you're bringing people in that aren't used to your culture. And you got to work with them, and they're teaching others, and you already know you have a challenge, right? We sat down with the customers and said, hey, look, here's where we're at. We were completely honest with them. What we were doing, what we were rebuilding, kind of asking for some time, asking for a little forgiveness. And you know what, for the most part, they were pretty good, with the exception of the 2 I kind of mentioned. And we really needed to drive the culture as fast as we could. The fundamentals that I started off with, we didn't have these in place back in 2012. I think I mentioned we had, values, and our fundamentals came in within 24 months of that, and they were a big game changer in these facilities. Okay, and people really grasped onto them quickly. And it really kind of helped us drive the business in a direction that we really wanted to take it. So learnings. Number 1, trust your gut. My gut told me not to do this deal. My wife was here. She wanted to be here. I said, you don't want to come. This is going to be boring. I wouldn't have done the deal. And it had nothing to do with most of the things up there. It had to do with the ownership. When we spent time with the ownership, I was just left with a feeling that I didn't like. And then I set that aside, and then we looked at all the numbers and the X's and the O's and all the other stuff, and we rationalized why we want to do it. So I just tell you guys, our gut usually gets us through life and things that we do, and maybe you're one of those people that you'd say, I can't trust my gut. But I think pretty much for most people, you probably can, right? And if it doesn't feel right, don't be afraid to listen to it. So that's number 1. Sometimes opportunities have sharp edges. So when I listed, the things that we had identified, we saw those as opportunities. They're not running their business very optimally, and they're making money. We're going to be able to make more money by doing things the right way. We're going to put equipment in. We're going to put systems in. We're going to do all these things, okay? But there's another side to that as well. no amount of lawyering can truly insulate you from a bad deal. So, your lawyers do all they can do, and if you let them do too much, you won't get any deals done, because their job's to protect you from everything. And of course, the opposing attorneys are doing the same thing for their client. And if you leave them in a room together, there'll be no deal gets done. So, if you guys have done deals, you know this, and at some point, as the person has to make the decision, you have to assess risk and you decide how much you want to take. And but you have things in the documents that protect you. Yeah, they do, but you don't want to have to use them because it's going to be painful. So just keep that in the back of your mind. You're not going to write up something that's going to, hey, if something goes wrong, we're good. Nah, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. The F-bomb, fraud. So frauds and everything. Judges don't like fraud. Short of having video, Steve, right? It's hard to prove it. And you can have most of the proof there, and they're still going to give the benefit of the doubt. Because really, this is the one thing that if you're going to get restitution, this is the area you're going to get it. So we did go down that path. The problem with that is it's distracting, and it takes years. We ended up settling out of court with them, so we got a little bit back. But you're not going to feel like you're whole. And I can tell you they don't feel like they're whole. There's no winners in it. It's losers. So that's probably the legal stuff. You just can't protect yourself. And the big thing here is culture. So know where the non-negotiables are, right? You can't rebuild everything. And the key here is, in my younger days when I was learning about doing deals and stuff, and you'd hear, well, culture's important. You want to have a culture fit. Well, we're not going to have a culture fit in our business. There is nobody else in North America that has 1,300 employees. They're mostly 50 employees, individual owners, and they run their business a certain way. So we're never going to find a perfect fit, right? So we have to put a game plan together to build it. And I think the key here is it takes time. And when you add that to the other variables and the risks, the more time it's going to take, it introduces a higher level of risk. Okay? And I'd encourage you, I wouldn't shy away from something just because of that. But if I go back to the previous slide and with some of the other opportunity areas as we looked at them, and you throw this in, this became difficult because as we tried to work the issues, because we didn't have a functioning culture, it was like plugging holes, in a boat that has many holes to be plugged. You plug one here and there'd be something else there, right? So the good news in all this is the inherent good in people. And if you show them a way and a path to what it means to live the culture, maybe the way your company lives its culture and what that means, they come along. And so today, we just finished our culture work. We survey all of our employees, and we want to know, how we're doing, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, those kinds of things. And the two particular facilities that we have in Warren and Mexico, it's just amazing how far along things have come. Now, one little factoid in this is we had the Michigan plants and the Mexico plants. We had none of these problems in Mexico. So from the day one when we purchased the facility, the Mexico operation has run extraordinarily well. We've had none of these problems. All the problems, this comes back to culture, were where the two owners sat. Because the owners didn't like to go to Mexico, so they didn't go very few times. And there was a very good GM in Mexico, and he did things the way he thought it was right, which was pretty good. And they were very successful. So, anyways, there's an anatomy of one that didn't quite turn out as well, or at least gone down a path that we'd like to go. I don't know how we're doing on time. Pretty good. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take a shot at them.
Curious, based on what you learned here, what you've changed. Well, first, if you're going to look at any of the acquisitions, and whenever if you do, taking what you learned, how would you change your approach to future acquisition, both in how you analyze the deal, pre-deal, and then from an integration standpoint?
Yeah, good question. And so the answer is yes. We're in the midst of a number of them. As we look at this, I think a couple things. Our culture assessment up front will be a little more rigorous. As we look back, we weren't as strong in the operations side. So one of the challenges in our industry is there's not a lot of support services, people that are marketing into what we do. So it's not like you can go to St. Norbert's and get your degree in anodizing or electronickel plating, much less the equipment and everything else. And so it's hard to get people to come in and understand that piece of it. So if you were to walk into our plant and you walk around, you look at the equipment, you're only to see so far. And we blew it there, because at the end of the day, what took our legs out on this was when the equipment couldn't function. That, we could overcome a lot of other stuff, but that you can't. And so in the diligence phase, because you don't do it you're on your pre-workup, but once you get to diligence phase, bringing in an outside set of eyes to give you the opinion. That in ours, because we did quality of earnings, we did a lot of things. We've kind of gone back over that, and we really missed it on that side. We used our internal team to do that, and I'd go back to, we can fix that, we can put this in, and at the end of the day, that really hurt us. Any other questions? That was pretty depressing, I guess, huh? I did have hair back then. No. I hope you guys don't have to go through this, but there is a lot you do learn, and we're a stronger organization as a result of it. And so I appreciate the opportunity, Brian, to come today and share that story a little bit, and hopefully maybe some of it can be a benefit to you. Yeah, Dan.
Why don't you give us then the where you are today, and you said you can fix things, and tell them how you fixed everything.
Tell them how we fix everything?
How's Michigan doing today?
Yeah, so Michigan is doing pretty good. It's not doing great, but it's doing well. And so we've been, and the difference is I started off by saying the automotive industry's taken a little dip, right, in the last year. And the dynamics in the industry are kind of interesting. So look, people aren't buying small cars. You guys, Ford shutting down their small car. It's a trend, and it's rippling right now through North America and hitting Toyota. Toyota's experiencing this stuff for their first time. They canceled some major programs that they were kicking off, and so there's a shift. So we have part of our business that's kind of soft, and another part of our business that's doing pretty good. People are buying SUVs. They're buying pickup trucks. That's where the market is today. Gas is at whatever it was, $2.74 coming in. I kind of worry because I watch this, right? And I mean, tomorrow gas goes to $4. So you guys saw what happened yesterday with Iran and what we're going to do. And supposedly there's a deal behind the scenes. We'll see what comes out of that and what actually happens to our gas prices. But if they go to $4, you can bet the Suburbans and all those things, their sales are going to slow down. I mean, we kind of shift. And so a lot of that's affecting our Michigan plants, small car business. So, and the fact that GM's moving much of their production out of the U.S., which is not surprising. And the reason why it's not surprising is because GM sells more cars in China than any other country that they're in. And they're building cars and sending them. So what they're doing is they're going to build their cars closer to the market that they're selling them in. I know it's not good for U.S., but would any of you guys do that? Probably makes good business sense, right? And that's kind of what's happening. It's a little astonishing, but yeah, they sell more cars in China than they do here in the U.S. So, yes.
What has the impact of the trade negotiations had on your business?
I think the biggest thing for us was until terms were announced, so to speak, the uncertainty was hurting everybody. It's amazing what uncertainty does. It kind of freezes people. So today, I really don't see much impact. We're waiting for the China deal to get done so we can understand that. I think generally speaking, it's very good for the U.S., for us. We don't import-export anything. So our plant in Mexico, for example, everything that we do in that plant goes to a plant in Mexico for the most part. Nothing, we're not taking anything from the U.S., taking it to Mexico, processing it, bringing it back. It's all going into manufacturing facilities in Mexico and Japan and somewhat Europe, because the Japanese and the Europeans have invested the most money in Mexico. The Americans were a little behind the scene coming into Mexico on their investments. But it's been, since there's been certainty, it's been good. And I think once we get the China deal done and we understand what that looks like, that's going to help quite a bit as well. And then we'll see what happens with the economy. I think everybody's kind of waiting for that. But Mexico's feeling the effects of what I explained before, because many people were moving their small car production to Mexico, and now they pulled the plug on that. Yeah.
I'm curious from a leadership development perspective, with your integration team, how prepared were they for those technical and adaptive challenges?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can objectively answer that question, because I'm going to say they were well prepared, right? I would only tell you that they're the same group of people that did 5 before that and did it really well. I think the emotional toll it took, I think it was hard. First of all, the team is from Green Bay. Okay, why is that important? From some of our business, and you guys may have heard this, the values of people here in northeastern Wisconsin are tremendous, right? And they take a lot of pride. They put a group of 8 people in an environment that they saw some things that were just appalling. They just couldn't believe people would do this. They hadn't seen that before. So, if there was an area that we'd say we weren't prepared for, that was it. What happens when we see those things? We didn't prepare them for that. And we didn't deal with it well very early on. And that caused a lot of the problems. We took a situation and we made it worse. Kind of the old look in the mirror and you see who the enemy is, and, we made it worse. So, from that standpoint.
On your 24 behaviors
Yes.
that are fundamental to your culture, how do you recognize or reinforce that to strengthen your culture?
How much time do I got? You give me the hook.
One more minute.
I get 1 minute. Okay, real quick. Fundamentals. Every day in the company, every employee of our company talks about the fundamental. So each week we take one fundamental and to discuss. So the beginning of the day in our plants, we do stretches. We talk about the fundamental of the day. What does it mean to me? Can you give me a good example? You talk about somebody who exemplifies it. We talk about them every day. We get to every person in the company that way. The old way, we go top down, we talk about stuff. If you got hired today, you may not hear anything about values or fundamentals or anything for gosh knows how long, right? And so it's a ritual. And so we ritualize them. And every meeting in a company that starts with 3 or more people, we start with our fundamental of the day. This week's fundamental is blameless problem solving. So, and we talk about it. Try to make it real, personalize it. Great question. Thank you all. I got the hook.
I'd like to thank Bob for being here today to tell your story. We learn a lot in life and business with the challenges and the struggles, and we appreciate your willingness to share this challenge and teach us the importance of fundamentals, what it means to really tend to culture, and congratulations to you and your team for navigating this, and thank you for sharing this story with us. Let's give another round of applause, please. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please see Amy Sorensen, who is right back here and to my left, and we'll get you a copy of that. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today at this session. For those of you who joined us at the other sessions, this is the last session of the year. Oh. But don't be afraid, because we're going to start our 22nd season off next year. So stay tuned for more information on next year's series. The website will be updated with a list of speakers, dates, and topics by the 1st of September. So be sure to check the website for that, for another great season. Now, here we are, the end of our breakfast series. The sun is shining. Enjoy this beautiful day, and thank you for being here.